You have just finished studying the career of excuse me, sorry,
Yet another book about Alexander the Great.
Alexander the
Yet
Great.
another one.
What are we to know about the second half
Second half.
of his career?
Uh-huh.
And start us off with this. What marks the second half?
Oh, first half of his career was the destruction of the great king, the king of Persia, the Shah of the King of Kings. Uh, and after the destruction of the Persian monarchy,
Mhm.
what next? A lot of Alexander's soldiers naturally assumed that what next?
Was
Go home.
we're going home.
What's a loot? Vast amounts of loot, truly incredible amounts of loot. The
Hmm.
Persian kings had accumulated enormous treasure in three or four different cities. Alexander had other ideas. He meant to move from the heartland of the Persian Empire to its eastern domains that were always kind of loosely governed.
Okay.
He meant to establish his authority there and to go even further. He meant to go to the end of the world as he understood it from his tutor Aristotle, who had no idea how big Asia actually was. Alexander had this ambition of going all the way to the ocean. So first secure the eastern regions, the Persian Empire that had always been loosely ruled.
Huh.
Eastern regions. Now that brings us into Afghanistan, Kyrgyzstan, Tajikistan, Uzbekistan, brings us into Kashmir and Punjab. The Persian Empire was almost unimaginably large. These eastern regions are loosely governed.
Were
Alexander,
they governed at least that they were still able to collect revenue?
uh, Persian practice was to appoint regional, for most of the empire, in most of the empire, Persian practice was to appoint regional governors, satraps. They raised revenue and sent some of it as demanded to the great king. They
Hmm.
maintained a basic road system for the great king and stations for couriers in the service of the great king, relay riders, you might say. And they were to raise troops as directed. They could raise troops on their own because, of course, it's a long distance from the frontiers to the Persian king and one of his capitals. But all the capitals are in the heartland of the Persian Empire, what we would call today southern Iraq and eastern Iran, pretty much. The heartland, or southern Iraq and western Iran, pretty much the heartland of the Persian Empire. So the regional satraps had to be able to raise some troops on their own, uh, but also, as directed by the great king, and send them to him. But in the eastern region, he was called King of Kings because the eastern region is so far remote. In eastern regions, there were tributary kings more than appointed governors.
Ah.
As tributary kings, though, they were expected, well, to offer some tribute occasionally
Hmm.
and to provide troops as required.
Interesting. So they were analogous to vassals of the feudal era.
Yes,
Okay. And this was a relatively stable system.
was more, as with any empire, more stable in some regions than in others.
I've always been curious how Alexander, coming from this tiny Macedonian country, was able to topple these what seemed to me just behemoths of empires. Uh,
Machiavelli commented on that.
okay.
So, as I say, yet another book. Everyone's commented on Alexander
Sure.
uh, and commented on him for a very long time. He had great difficulty in his eastern campaigns because he had to subdue, first of all, terrain was often difficult, had to subdue one tribe at a time. But Machiavelli made the comment that highly decentralized polities are easier to defeat in battle but harder to conquer, whereas highly centralized polities harder to defeat in battle because they can muster great forces,
Hmm.
but easier to conquer. You take out the nerve center and they're done.
Okay. So you can chop off the head of the snake.
Yes.
and be in charge.
It's a highly centralized system.
Gotcha.
So the theme of the book really is, so he took out the Persian army, took out, yeah, took out the Persian army in three very impressive victories, occupied the Persian capitals. The king, the great king, fled from him, was eventually murdered by some of his own people.
Mm-hmm.
So the western regions and the heartland of the Persian Empire were overcome relatively easily. Uh, there was strong resistance from some places, including the city of Tyre, famously huge, long, difficult siege of Tyre. At the end of the siege, it was thoroughly destroyed, which the Jews regarded as fulfillment of prophecy in Isaiah.
Ah.
That Tyre, the queen of the seas, is going to get hers someday. Uh, he was welcomed in Egypt. Egypt had uh, always resented being ruled by Persia. Other regions seemed to resent it less. Egypt welcomed Alexander. Egyptian priests were willing to play up to Alexander's extraordinary, not to say insane, self-confidence and suggest that he was actually a son of Amun-Ra.
Ah.
Whoa.
Ah, there was a sycophantic streak to the religious establishment of the time.
The Egyptian priests had traditionally been in the service of the pharaoh.
Hmm.
Persian kings, although they were very, very tolerant for local religious practices, famously, of course, letting the exiled Jews return from Babylon to the homeland after the Persians kind of took over, really. Not, yeah, overthrow is not the word. After the Persians took over the Babylonian Empire,
Mm-hmm.
uh, they never felt the need to play pharaoh in Egypt. One of Alexander's inspirations was, ooh, the Egyptians hate the Persians anyway. They are welcoming me. They'll welcome me more if I give them the chance to adopt me as pharaoh.
Ah.
So he made a pilgrimage into the desert to a shrine of Amun-Ra, allowed Egyptian priests to declare him a son of Amun. And there's this disquieting uncertainty as to the degree to which Alexander might actually have believed something like that. There was already, we see this in the Hellenistic era following Alexander's time, already a tendency to assimilate uh, other religions to the Greek pantheon, so Ammon to Zeus. Uh, Alexander had extraordinary self-confidence as well as tremendous ability.
Ah.
That was part of his charisma. It wasn't a charisma based on an outstanding physical appearance. It was the famous story that the after he overthrew the Persian monarchy, he met the women of the Persian royal family, accompanied by his closest friend ever from childhood, Hephaestion. Uh, Hephaestion was tall and beautifully built and outstandingly good looking. So the women of the royal family saluted him.
Oh.
Uh-oh.
Oops.
Alexander was short, very fit, more a runner's build.
Hmm.
He
Interesting.
was quite a runner in his youth.
But
Short,
wiry, perhaps.
very wiry, very
Uh-huh.
fit. Short, very wiry, very fit. Good looking, but not head turning.
Sure.
His charisma wasn't based on that. It was based on this overwhelming self-confidence backed by an ability to charm and tremendous skill. He was good at a lot of things,
Okay. He was a true multi-talent.
and enormously so.
Uh-huh.
Uh, Alarmingly so. It is alarming to find that much ability
In one person.
packed
So,
into one person of restless energy and apparently insatiable ambition. Not enough to overthrow the old Persian Empire. Not overthrow. It's the theme of the book I just finished. Really, just as the Persian Empire didn't so much overthrow the Babylonian Empire as take it over, it became increasingly clear to the discontented part of his army that he meant to take over the Persian Empire and in the process become somewhat Persian and somewhat less Greco-Macedonian.
Ah, he was going to start to blend his identity with the dominant culture of the area that they
Yes,
were fighting in.
yes. By the end of his life, it's clear. By the end of his life, what a life. Hard fighting, hard working, hard traveling, hard partying, hard drinking. Wore himself out, took a nearly fatal wound in the course of one of his bizarre, why was he doing it? One of his campaigns in what's now Pakistan. So worn out by hard life, plus a nearly fatal wound, plus a devastatingly difficult trip through the deserts of what's now south, western Pakistan, southeastern Iran, uh, then possibly contracting malaria near Babylon. Worn out, died at the age of 33.
Just 33.
Just 33.
Oh, I thought he was closer to 40. I thought he was like 36 or 37. 33.
33.
So just a 15-year career upon ascending to the throne, right? Because he
13-year.
13 year.
Ascended the throne at 20 after his father's assassination. When his was first seriously involved in battle at the age of 16.
Mm-hmm. That's quite the life.
It's an extraordinary, extraordinary career. The theme of the book I just finished, second half of his career, is his series of campaigns to bring the eastern regions of the Persian Empire into obedience to him,
Mm.
and to fulfill or attempt to fulfill his fantastic desire to push all the way to the ocean.
Which he didn't quite achieve, right?
No,
Uh,
he was deep in what's now Pakistan
mm-hmm.
when his army indicated that they'd had
Charisma aside,
even the highest, charisma built up by extraordinary victories.
sure.
But still, if you march all the way from Macedonia to the middle of what's now Pakistan,
On your own 2 feet.
your own two
Right.
feet,
You didn't drive.
with three major battles and many minor battles, uh, one huge siege and several lesser, well, no, four major battles, many minor battles, one huge siege and many minor sieges on the way,
Mm-hmm.
you're tired. As has been pointed out, by that time they'd been gone for 10 years, which is exactly the length of the Trojan War,
Ah.
which was so foundational, the story of which is so foundational to their culture.
Mm-hmm.
So 10 years is a long time to ask any group of soldiers to be campaigning, but there's also a cultural sense that 10 years is
Enough.
enough.
Wow. He had children.
Yes, but
We don't know much of what happened to them. Is that
the,
true?
the children he did have were very young when he died.
Okay.
And in the, I should get a board game about this. I've got board games about lots of things,
Mm.
but a board game about the jostling for power in the aftermath of his death. Because really, at that point, he had only two children. One in Babylon, where he died, was just an infant. His daughter, his son by Roxanne. Uh, Possibly Roxanne, not Macedonian, but Sogdian, from what we call today Afghanistan. Possibly the only wife he ever had any romantic feelings for.
Interesting.
And then another son, a little older, from another wife, and kept somewhere back in the western domains of the empire, but neither of them emerged into history. There was a tussle for power among
His generals,
his
correct?
generals,
Okay.
because he died without leaving a clear heir.
And
He
was that deliberate on his part?
No,
Uh,
it's fairly clear he'd been grooming his childhood friend. Possibly. Some biographers would suggest, lots of biographies of Alexander, possibly some biographers would suggest the only person he ever really loved, his childhood friend Hephaestion.
Mm-hmm.
He'd been grooming him to be his second in command, and therefore presumably successor. But Hephaestion, very similar lifestyle to Alexander's. He died not long before Alexander did. Proof that even the youngest and strongest constitution is going to be worn out, from age 16 to age 33, pretty much 17 years of nonstop
Action of,
action, interspersed by severely heavy partying.
I wonder, right. Did that do more damage than the action? Hard to say.
Hard to say. The action's
Yeah.
pretty rough.
The action was rough. Yeah. Partying will get to you. Mm-hmm. Wow. I think I asked you before we went on if Alexander looked back on his life with any cynicism, and you didn't think he did.
I think that cynicism begins to describe Alexander.
Okay.
Uh, that describes some of his generals.
Okay.
Uh, but he believed in he believed in himself, and he believed in his destiny. One of the themes of the book I just finished is that he began to think, and I think the author is probably correct,
Hmm.
not the first person to suggest this, he began to think that his destiny was to refound the Persian Empire, but refound it with a infusion of Macedonian and Greek blood and culture, but still Persian. He was definitely moving in a Persian direction by the time he died, which was creating tension with his army. There's lots of tension within his army. No one but Alexander could hold it together over the long run. With the Greeks and the Macedonians, who in theory were eternal allies, in practice, the Greeks had been beaten into alliance with the Macedonians. So there was tension. And between the Greeks and the Macedonians, on the one hand, there's tension between them and the various Asiatics. Among the Asiatics, there's tension between the Persians, Iranians, you might say today, and all the others. It's all the others, they had their warrior traditions. They were a little tired of having been underlings to the Persians for so long.
Mm-hmm.
The Persians emphatically had warrior traditions. Alexander was willing to work with that. So it was a increasingly multi-ethnic army.
Okay, so he had recruited replacements for losses
Oh yes.
from the very armies he conquered.
Oh yes.
Okay. And what was the sales pitch there? We'll come work for us and you'll get paid
Yes.
really well.
Well, especially for a warrior culture.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, in the U.S. West, it was not too hard for the army to get Apache scouts to assist the army against other Apaches. The deal's pretty simple. You're a warrior. You're warriors. We'll give you a chance to continue being a warrior, and this time on the winning side.
And you'll get
And you'll
paid.
get paid. Yeah. So, and military service in the Persian tradition was inseparable from nobility, similar with the Macedonian tradition.
Mm-hmm.
So it was a way of affirming their self-respect
Ah,
after a very violent conquest, let it be said.
okay. So is it true to say that Alexander had some of the instincts that Rome later showed that we are able to beat people, but then get them in on the party?
Yes, he had that instinct, which is utterly alien to the Greeks. Um, Utterly alien to them. The Greeks had even had a hard time accepting people from other cities. It's alien to the Macedonians. The Greek attitude is summed up by Aristotle. Alexander's tutor. Uh, there are Greeks and there are barbarians. There it is.
And even among the Greeks, they were not particularly enthused about foreigners from other Greek cities.
No, Greek cities were very stingy with their citizenship.
Hmm.
Uh, Sparta, ridiculously stingy with its citizenship.
To its own demise.
To its own demise, the number of Spartans eligible for military service kept declining. I think I told you before these statistics, but I want to explain the demise of Sparta. It's the decrease of the Spartan army from 6,000 to 2,000 over the course of a couple of centuries. They couldn't. Oh, 2,000, maybe the few, the proud, the Spartans. That's too damned few, and probably too damn proud. Uh, uh, versus what the Romans were able to do in Italy,
Mm.
as little by little, not without some severe bumps along the road, such as the social war of the 80s BC, but not without some severe bumps. But the Romans, little by little and somewhat irregularly, were willing to accept just about everyone in Italy into Roman citizenship. And just about everyone in Italy was willing eventually to accept Roman citizenship, with the result that the Romans had a military manpower pool of 200,000 and more. Uh,
Numbers that were
probably
inconceivable.
closer to a million. If you've got a manpower pool of close to a million, you can absorb the kind of, yeah, close to a million.
Yeah.
You think of able-bodied men of military age uh, with the United Italy. Uh, if you've got a military manpower pool of a million, you can absorb disasters like Cannae. They're still disastrous,
Right.
but you can absorb them and keep on going. Alexander had something of that instinct, and it was very hard for most Greeks, let it be said, especially Greek intellectuals, a la Aristotle, very hard for them to accept this. It's a fascinating book. Second half of Alexander's career, you read about uh, his background being tutored by Aristotle, the Greek scholars he brought in his campaign, but along the way he encounters the ancient tradition of the Egyptian priests, the ancient tradition of the Babylonian priests slash scholars, the ancient tradition of the Persian magi, three of whom would famously visit Bethlehem one day. And eventually he encounters uh, Hinduism as he moves into the valley of the Indus River,
Hmm.
and Hindu sages and Hindu wise men. It's a fascinating cross-cultural experience.
Hmm.
And Alexander seems, one of the themes of the book, seems to have been increasingly open to that. As long as everybody acknowledged him as emperor
Right.
and did what he told them to do.
Sure. Sure. But he had a leniency towards religion that and a cross-cultural composition of his empire that other Greeks would have looked on with some amount of suspicion.
Yes, oh, definitely. Definitely. And there are many stories from his campaign that bring out that suspicion.
Mm-hmm.
There was enough cultural tension between Greeks and Macedonians. Uh, then you add to that the tension between them, at least spoke Greek together, the tension between them and all of the races or ethnic groups that had been part of the Persian Empire, including, of course, the Persians themselves,
Right.
who were used to being on top.
And now they were taking orders.
Now they're taking orders. So Alexander increasingly showed care to bring them on board,
Mm.
but definitely with him as king.
I see. What language were they all speaking?
Ooh. Greeks and Macedonians spoke Greek. There are many dialects of Greek. The Athenians were quite convinced that the Greek is Attic Greek.
Mm.
And subsequent, because the Athenians produced so many great writers, already by Alexander's day, there was a list of classics. So people in Alexander's time, including Alexander himself, would be quoting Euripides and Aeschylus and Sophocles, the way that educated people in America quote Shakespeare.
Interesting.
The historian I just read, she tossed in a little bit of a jab. She said, and perhaps with the same pretentious flair. Uh, so there were established classics all in Attic Greek. So that was the Greek that had already been established, partly to the annoyance of everybody else. But they accepted it. They all read these. Alexander constantly quoted Euripides.
Uh-huh.
Uh, then had all of the Greeks agreed in looking down, except the Macedonians, agreed on looking down in the Macedonian dialect. These various dialects of Greek. Then the Persian Empire had a lingua franca, the unifying language was Aramaic.
Aramaic.
But that was old. The Persians didn't create that. There's a wonderful scene in Second Kings. Jerusalem is being besieged by the Assyrians. This goes back 3 centuries. Jerusalem is being besieged by the Assyrians. The Assyrians, the Assyrian general gives a threat, the really scary threat to the people of Jerusalem. You're going to be reduced to eating your own dung and drinking your own urine if you insist on resisting us. And the king of Jerusalem, the king of Judah, says, uh, I speak Aramaic, use that, don't speak in Hebrew, but the Syrian general clearly could speak Hebrew, intended the inhabitants of Jerusalem to hear his
Denunciation of their resistance.
yes, resistance is futile, which of course it turned out not to be. In that episode, the northern kingdom had been destroyed, but Jerusalem was, from the biblical perspective, miraculously rescued. From the historical perspective, not that I'm setting opposition between these two, but it's something you find very often in ancient and medieval warfare. The army besieging a place, well, you've got lots of guys eating, lots of guys and lots of animals eating and pooping in the same spot
For months.
for months.
Ugh.
You have a hygiene catastrophe. Eventually, disease breaks out. So there are many examples of besieging army
Just breaking camp and leaving because,
up and leaving as got being killed by an epidemic. So
and typically leaving their sick behind, or what was?
depending on how panicked they were.
Hmm.
Anyway, so Aramaic already was a lingua franca for the Western region of the Persian Empire.
Mm-hmm.
In Babylon, they still spoke Old Babylonian with great determination. Still has some records kept in Sumerian, which is impressive. Nobody spoke it anymore. Babylon itself, Aramaic was the lingua franca, but educated people there still made a point of operating in Old Babylonian and not the language of modern barbarians. Egypt it spoke Egyptian, blasted, darn it. Still used the hieroglyphic script. One effect of what they call the Hellenistic age, introduced by Alexander, is that the Egyptians would continue speaking Egyptian, but would no longer, and writing Egyptian, but would no longer use the hieroglyphic script. They would write Egyptian with the Greek alphabet,
Oh,
which
okay.
gives us what's called the Coptic language.
Ah,
So that's coming. Alexander's time, still the old Egyptian language. Uh, Around Jerusalem, still Hebrew. Same kind of thing. Increasingly a learned language. Aramaic was becoming the vernacular even for Jews. Then in the western region of the Persian Empire, of course, all sorts of languages.
so what Alexander's staff would have employed a team of interpreters for? Okay, and Alexander would have had a working knowledge of Aramaic, or basically no exposure to it prior to arriving.
Prior to arriving, it's very doubtful he had any exposure to Aramaic.
Okay.
He operated in Greek,
Okay.
but there are many merchants and traders, including Greek merchants and traders, who could function Aramaic. And there was a long tradition of Greek mercenaries serving the Persian Empire.
Ah,
Alexander killed a lot of these Greek mercenaries.
and then hired their Persian comrades later to serve in his army.
Yes,
Yes.
as well as hiring lots more Greek mercenaries. Um, So, yeah, the Aramaic remained the lingua franca of the western regions, what had been the Persian Empire. Although increasingly after Alexander's time, competed with Greek.
Okay. Wow.
And Persia, the Persian heartland, spoke the ancestral language to today's Farsi. Uh, and then once you get to the eastern regions, the Persian Empire, all sorts of languages.
Okay. So in Western Persia, it was Aramaic, but then in Central,
A heartland,
the heartland, it was what we would call Farsi today.
ancestor to Farsi.
Okay. The predecessor. Dang. And so they would have relied on traders and merchants they would hire them as interpreters
Yes.
for the various functions of essentially what became both a moving headquarters and a moving court.
A moving headquarters and a moving court. He had to have some subordinate headquarters, obviously,
Mm-hmm.
uh, as his empire grew larger.
Hmm.
And he had to leave garrisons in different places.
Hmm. In all the 13 years of his travels, is there any indication that for the space of, I don't know, even 6 months or a year, he was actually happy?
He was a deeply restless man,
Deeply restless.
deeply restless. I don't think there's any point at which Alexander was content.
Hmm.
I don't think content was built into him.
Ah, not part of his personality.
At the very end, he was planning to invade Arabia.
Mm-hmm. Hmm. He would have died. He would have died in battle if disease and
Yeah, he
exhaustion hadn't
also
gotten him.
did die in battle. The siege of a city in what's now Pakistan.
Hmm.
Uh, and the siege, he lost his temper. Part of his style was he'd direct the battle, but then he liked to have the decisive assault, what he meant to be the decisive assault, and usually it worked out. Decisive assault to be led by the companion cavalry with him at the head. At the head. So he would be involved in battle at the end.
Ah,
Uh,
so he basically put everything in motion, and then when he thought there was a moment for the decisive thrust.
yes. And he was never badly wounded until that siege of a city in what's now central Pakistan. The siege was too slow for him, and to encourage his troops, he dashed forward. The assault was proceeding too slowly. He dashed forward, climbed one of the siege ladders, leapt onto the wall with two companions. And this did inspire enough of his troops that they climbed up the ladder after him. Too many climbed up the ladder at once, and it collapsed under them.
Oh dear God.
So there was Alexander and two of his companions on the wall. Alexander thought the best thing to do is jump off the wall. So for a moment, it was just himself
Mm-hmm.
uh, being attacked uh, by numerous opponents. The two companions jumped down in time to save him getting killed. And then other soldiers arrived finally in time to save them from getting killed. He was very badly wounded, came near death, had an arrow deeply embedded in him.
Hmm.
Greek surgery was in some ways very well developed. They had a fascinating collection of surgical tools, but they had a very poor knowledge of human anatomy. Uh, and it was always risky letting a surgeon go to work on you, and they had no anesthesia. Medievals had some ideas of anesthetics. They also had of no idea of sanitizing wounds. Uh, the medievals had some idea of that.
Hmm.
Medieval surgeons would wash out a wound with wine, and they didn't understand exactly. They didn't have
Why
clear
this is
reason how to do
helping.
it, but it seemed to help.
Right.
The Greeks didn't have that. It was
Yeah.
tremendously risky. The surgeon dug out the arrowhead, in the course of which Alexander lost so much blood that darn near died. But he came back.
Hmm.
Never his full self after that.
Really?
He never completely recovered from that nearly fatal injury.
Huh.
And that was followed by a grueling march through the desert.
Wow.
The desert of what's, I think I mentioned that, what's now southwestern Pakistan, southeastern Iran.
Mm-hmm.
And that was deeply grueling. By the time we got back to the heartland of the Persian Empire, in retrospect, it's clear he's starting to wear out.
Ah,
He wouldn't admit it.
sure.
Couldn't admit it, probably.
He had never lived any other way.
Never lived any other way.
Right. He never relaxed.
Never. Astonishing thing to read about. That was part of his charisma. He was fascinating. He could be charming. He was funny. He was brilliant. He was good at everything he did. Physically fearless.
Mm-hmm. Wow. To combine that with, yeah, charming and funny and physically fearless and bright.
Very bright.
Yeah.
Successful at almost everything he ever did.
Hmm. Yeah. Truly, yeah, truly one of the remarkable personalities of history.
Even he, towards the end, he was asking too much of his army.
Uh-huh. Right. They were ready to go home.
They were ready to go home.